Today on the Camp Owners Podcast, we're talking about how to work smarter, not harder, and why even the most seasoned camp operations can benefit from a fresh look at how we do things. We're joined by Victoria Golden from Polaris Solutions, who specializes in helping organizations tune up their systems so they run even more efficiently, more intentionally, and with a lot less friction. This is also our first crossover episode of the season, and I'm excited to welcome Jordanna Grossinger from the Day Camp Pod. It's Bring Your Kid to Your Podcast Day, so settle in because this conversation is all about finding practical, realistic ways to make your systems work for you, not against you. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast.
This is the Camp Owners Podcast from Go Camp Pro, exploring best practices and issues that professionals in the private camp industry face every day. You can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. Your mission is campers. Whereabouts' mission is making their experience coordinated and connected. Whereabouts is the only camper management system that keeps parents, admin, and staff in sync in real time, so every camper's day runs with confidence, clarity, and care. Check them out today at whereaboutsapp.io.
Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners and industry experts to discuss the big issues in the private camp world. If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and you think it would be useful for other camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen to us. Hi, everybody. My name's Howie Grossinger. I am the co-owner and director of Camp Robin Hood. My partner in crime is not available today. She is going to a camp event and she's in the air and she got delayed in Midwest weather. And I am almost flying solo. Well, actually, I'm not flying solo because we're doing a crossover episode with a friend from the Day Camp Pod. Not only is this person a friend from the Day Camp Pod, but this person happens to be my daughter, Jordanna Grossinger, who is the co-director at Camp Robin Hood. Hi, Jordanna. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me. So excited to be here. We miss you, Kelly, but glad I could be able to jump in on this one.
I know that Kelly wrote me while she was in the air. She's saying, I couldn't have had a better person take my place.
Aw, thanks, Cal.
And I showed you that text, so it's true.
It's true. It's true. It was fact checked by me.
Wonderful. George, thank you so much. You're enjoying all your podcast stuff these days?
It's been so fun, and I love the chance to do more crossover episodes. It's been great to see everything all the different podcasts bring to the table, and I'm a big listener of the Camp Owners podcast, so it's nice to be on here.
Right back at you. Amazing. Well, today I'm really excited, Jord, because we have Victoria Golden from Polaris Solutions. She came to us highly recommended because her company has been immersed in the camp space of recent. And it's a great opportunity because Victoria came to us from fellow camp pros. And the motto of work smarter, not harder is the way this was presented to us. And if there's ever a group that is constantly looking to live by that motto, it is private camp owners. I know that. I've been doing this long enough. And as we get older, we think about that even more, Victoria. So I'm curious how you can help some of our people like me, aging kind of camp owner directors. But I think at the end of the day, the goal is to get us as camp people to do what we love most and find systems in place to help us. And I think we have the right person for that. Victoria, welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So, when we do our podcast, we often dig into a little bit of everyone's origin story, how they ended up in the camp space. Did they grow up at camp? And I think we're all curious to hear your story in camp and how you ended up doing what you do today and what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to share. So I'm from Kentucky. So I grew up going to Girl Scout camp in Western Kentucky, and it was an aquatics camp. So whenever I tell people I grew up sailing in Kentucky, they always have some questions about that. But grew up going to Girl Scout camp. I was an overnight resident camp that I really loved. And then when I got into college, I was doing a lot of theater. And so I ended up working for several summers at a children's theater in Lexington, Kentucky, and doing theater camp there. So I got the day camp theater experience as well, which was really exciting. And so I moved to Chicago to pursue theater and keep teaching, and ended up working at an early childhood arts center teaching music and art to babies. And that's where I met Andy Schlensky, who is an owner of Bubbles Academy. But he also, you may know him as an owner of North Star Camp for boys in Wisconsin. And so I also picked up finance as just really a hobby along the way with my theater and camp background. But after several years of lots of different, times in my career, of a lot of different organizations that I worked with in different roles, I connected back up with Andy in 2020 because he said, hey, I really need someone to run the finance for multiple companies that I own, not only Bubbles, which I was very intimately familiar with as a teacher, but also this summer camp and a couple of other organizations that were on his radar. And so in January 2020, I started working with Andy as his finance director across the camps. And so that was an incredible time to start a new role working with children, camps, travel. So we spent a couple of years really just, keeping the camps and the organizations running. But a couple of years in, he and I sat down and said, okay, we really want to find some better efficiencies between these companies. We have me, this one person who's working for all of them. There were a few other folks who were doing something similar, but it felt a little bit scattered. So I did a massive strategic project where I interviewed every director, every manager at every organization. And a couple months later, came back to him and sat him down and said, hey, actually, you need a different company to manage all of your companies. And so that's how Polaris Solutions was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
Someone who's theatrical, bringing numbers and systems to life. I'm like, is it a production when you present it, or do you dive into your theatrical skills for these presentations?
I think the biggest part is the storytelling.
Yeah.
So, not to, rag on accountants, but they're not always the most excitable people. And so a lot of people have kind of, aren't excited to talk to
Yeah,
people in finance, don't love hearing, budget meeting doesn't inspire a lot of excitement.
for
And
sure.
so for me, I really like to connect the story with what's actually happening with people, and having worked in a lot of the same roles that folks that I'm working with are doing. I can kind of understand their side of things too, instead of just being, a number crunching machine.
Yeah.
So being able to help tell the full story is definitely a big part of my theater background.
I'm sure it is. I thought maybe we would like some of the things that you've just mentioned. First of all, this all started like during COVID, correct? Like you were immersed in the creation of this at a time where there was a lot of uncertainty too. So I think you had to dive into like serious problem solving mode only because the industry, there were a lot of question marks about how the industry would survive. And so congratulations on that. And because I think we all, from time to time, I know even on this podcast, we try not to think back to those times, but I think a lot of us got through it, and luckily, this industry has really bounced back, and we love to tell those stories. So, congrats on that. I think as someone who's been working with camps, as we start sort of to dive into some of the things that you want our listeners to think about, what are some common problems that you're working with clients to solve? Like I think that, for Jordanna and I, as we run a multi-generational organization, we sometimes get stuck in the old ways and we can never change. And we know there's a problem, but we're afraid to change and what system would come in. And I'm sure there's some of that in the work that you do. But generally speaking, as you become really familiar with our industry, what kind of things are kind of you'd like to highlight of things that you're recognizing that camp operators may want to be thinking about?
Yeah, great question. And I kind of think about that question in two different ways. One is, what is a broad type of problem that people have that we can solve? And then the other is like, what are very specific problems? And they'll both probably ring true to you as a camp owner. So the first one, is that a lot of camp owners and directors, and really kind of the idea of why Polaris started in the first place, is I noticed that everyone I was speaking with at the ownership or director level was doing a lot of work that they really didn't need to be doing. It wasn't really high value work for themselves, but there wasn't really anyone else to do it because most camps have such a tight year round staff. And so you probably have a program person, a facilities person, maybe somebody in parent relations or operations. But then the owner is the person doing everything else. They're doing your bookkeeping, they're doing the workers' comp audits, you're doing the annual report filing, you're doing, the benefits re-enrollment. You probably have a broker or CPA helping you with some of these pieces, but the person actually collecting all the receipts and tracking things down really ends up being the camp owner most of the time because it's too high value work to give to a seasonal part-time employee, but you don't really have anybody else on your team who it fits. So one of the biggest things that we try to do is take all of that work off of the camp owners. But then we have to use really, really sharp systems that are really efficient in order to do that at scale. So a lot of the tools that we use could totally be used by camp owners and directors on their own. They don't have to work with us to do it. But one of the things we find a lot is that the hurdle to get over in terms of switching to a new system, or just learning a new system, or even just finding out what systems are out there can be really overwhelming when you still have all of your other day to day, week to week, month to month, annual things you have to do. So that's one reason I'm really excited to share some of our learnings because really anyone can, whether or not you're working with someone like me or not. So, some of the biggest things that we hear from camp owners when we first start working with them are that they have a lot of issues with their finance recording and tracking down receipts. Maybe you have a shared credit card, especially in the summer. There, a lot of camps tend to have, a couple cards that you just give to whoever, and maybe they bring it back with a receipt. And at the end of the summer, you get a pile 2 feet high of receipts that you have to go.
Totally.
Yeah. And so that can be, the reason why I think that comes up a lot is because most credit card companies make it kind of difficult to create credit cards. You usually have to have, social security number and a name on the card. And you're not going to get that for, if you have 150 seasonal staff, you're not going to get them all credit cards. First of all, you probably don't want them in their name. And it's also just so much work and so much extra effort that really wouldn't pay off for someone who maybe is going to make one or two transactions. So we use a credit card company that is also an expense management tool called Ramp, and it is far and away the biggest tool that we've seen to solve a lot of these problems for people. So I can dig into that a little bit more, but we've basically been able to solve the idea of tracking down receipts and having less expenses out there for different folks. So that's been fun. Another area that I think has been kind of tricky is onboarding and collecting forms and getting people paid, just all of the kind of operational pieces of HR onboarding. A lot of camps really excel at the people part of onboarding.
Yes.
So, having great relationships from hire to start date, having really amazing staff training. And then the last day of staff training, everyone is filling out their tax forms and their I-9s by lantern light on picnic tables at 10 p.m. trying to get them in because your payroll person needs them for tomorrow. So we like to implement systems that can collect those forms electronically before people come. I just have had too many forms filled out with, 7-digit social security numbers that don't match across different forms because nobody at the end of staff training is, able to get that done in a
Yeah.
complete way. So having some electronic systems that take a little bit of time to set up, but can really pay off later and have a better experience for your staff can
Yeah.
be, a really great tool. But there are so many tools out there. It can be really overwhelming to try to find the right one.
Yeah.
Well, Victoria, I can tell you that these are all hitting so close to home. Like for listeners, I'm sure they're like nodding their head at home too, because I know we're all looking at each other like, oh yes, good point, Victoria. Like we've experienced that. And I mean, I feel very privileged because I'm a multi-generational camp leader. So I'm a third generation camp leader. I've seen the evolution of the industry in some sense. And a lot of what you're describing, there's been a big evolution of there were people doing this that would stay for years and years and years and be the keeper of like all of that information, especially for private camps, right? And as they get older and as times change, I think a lot of people are like, let's just get another person to fit into that box that maybe they were doing and all the work it is not that easy. And so it's really interesting to hear about the ways that you're going about this to fill those gaps. But it also sounds like doing some education for organizations as a whole on like how do you set yourself up for success and how do you work as a team to do all those things? Have you had experiences like that in where your systems come in handy?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you said that because that really touches on my pet project, the thing that I'm always ranting and raving about, which is succession planning. And I think, especially for multifamily, multi generation family camps, but really even for people who are in their career for, several decades, I think people don't like to think about succession planning either because they like to think, well, we'll always work at camp and we'll always be here. Or it's just one of the things that doesn't stay on your radar as important. But one of the ways that I like to think about systems is setting a system up for the organization, not just for the people who are currently using it. And so, can your platform ensure that the information that's coming in is going to be accessible to the next person who comes after you? And even though I certainly don't plan on going anywhere, I'm constantly thinking about what would happen tomorrow if I, won the lottery and quit and, go start my own camp somewhere, I'm sure. But what would it look like for everybody I work with? Do they have access to their details? Do they have SOPs about how to run their payroll and do their, day-to-day bill pay? Do they understand what their, current budget looks like? But do they also understand what the budget development process is like every year? And so everything from kind of big picture to tiny details is documented so that if I were to disappear, someone else could pick up the reins and move right along. And I feel like a lot of camps just don't have that because when are you going to have the time to set that up? But
For
thinking about
sure.
it in context of the systems that you're using can be a really useful way to think about it.
Yeah, and I just think about so many of our camps have people who have such in-depth institutional knowledge and shortcuts and little tweaks that you would never know how to, execute on a particular task that, and it kind of makes me feel like I remember when I entered the business, Jordanna's grandfather, who still spends in his mid 80s and is still at camp 3 days a week. I remember some 20 or 25 years ago him asking his maintenance guy to keep a log of all the like where everything is and all these things. And I think at the time it was, but I credit him with being, so forward thinking because a lot of us in the business, don't apply that lens as regularly as we should. And as I get older and luckily have someone like Jordana who happens to be very systems oriented. So I think you guys are kind of kindred spirits in many ways. I feel like every one of our camps needs someone like that who's having an eye for that. And I guess my next kind of curiosity is, you know, many of us are on a variety of different camp management software systems. We use different platforms, but we're really at a time where so many of our camps are using multiple technologies, multiple platforms. And I can speak for myself that it's kind of scary to think about incorporating a new piece of innovation or a new piece of technology. And I was curious, as you come across camp pros who are kind of wary of, hey, I just wish it was the what it was, we used just paper and pen and I don't need to log that in this computer system or this, there is some resistance to that, but the reality is the innovation is just creating so many more efficiencies, but we are bombarded in the industry with so many different things. Tell me a little bit about your experience with kind of getting people to be onboarded with this concept or moving from what they used to do to something like this. How easy is it, in your mind, whether they work with Polaris or they find other platforms? Maybe you can just comment on that whole environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing that we just have to do, and I say this as a person who is on my computer all day, every day, loves the system, loves the new platform, you have to meet people where they are. So, especially people, if you think about your facilities folks, your property manager, they're not sitting on their computer all day. And so you have to make the systems that they're using as simple as possible for them to do on their phone, maybe do without service if your camp doesn't have great cell service around your whole property. And so, one thing that I think can sometimes trip people up is they get really excited about a shiny new project and they want to roll it out to their entire team and expect everyone to start using it right away. And the reality is that a lot of people are in the field. They're, talking to parents all day. They're traveling. They're, especially during the summer, they're going to be with campers all summer and not everybody is able to have access to technology. And so thinking about it from a summer standpoint, a year-round standpoint, but also just meeting people where they're at is the first kind of piece of advice I would give people. And something that I see people run into issues with sometimes. The next is that I don't really, I have some favorite softwares, but I don't really subscribe to the idea that there's one single best software that everyone should be using. And a lot of times the system you have could possibly be the right system for you. And if you don't think that you're using your current system to its full capability, I would encourage you to make sure that you have a really deep understanding of your system. Maybe you're not the one who set it up. Maybe you inherited it from someone else and that you never really went through the full training module that they would normally give someone. And I find a lot of times, especially with CampMinder, which is so complex and has so many different capabilities, that I'll come meet with a camp and they'll say, well, we're using spreadsheets for this. And I'll say, well, you could do this in CampMinder if you wanted to. And it is so complex and there's so many different pieces that they didn't even know they could do that. They thought they had to keep a series of notes about billing on a separate spreadsheet.
Right.
And when I show them like, oh, you can incorporate this into the actual billing, their minds are blown. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I don't have to have some auxiliary sheet that I'm referencing and cross-referencing. So really understanding the full capabilities of your software is important, especially because a lot of times I'll find that camps are using two different software that really they could just be using one. And so that added complexity not only is, exhausting at the end of the day, but also means that you don't have one single source of truth for your information. And so then best case scenario, they're integrated and you're passing things back and forth. Worst case scenario, you're manually updating sheets every other day. And so really just having a deep understanding of the systems you are using is pretty important. And then I think if you get to those steps and you get to a point where you think, okay, I really do understand the system I'm using. I'm ready to move to another one. Really think about the problems you're trying to identify. I, again, say this as someone who loves a new system. It can be really exciting to hear about something and think to yourself, oh, I want to use that too. So and so used that and they said it was great. But think to yourself first, what are the actual problems you're trying to solve? Because maybe Slack is a great example. Some camps use it really well and some people get really excited about it, but it doesn't work for everyone. And so if your problem is you're getting, important email messages lost in your email because all of your email threads devolve into chit chatty things or quick back and forth, then maybe Slack is the right answer for you. But if your problem is that, folks, aren't responding to other messages that have attachments and they need to include multiple outside stakeholders, and maybe Slack's not the right answer. So you really have to think about the problem that you're trying to solve and whether the software will solve it before just jumping right into the shiny new thing. And then I also just really encourage people to do in-depth conversations with folks who've used the platforms that they're thinking about using. So, it's really easy to just post in a Facebook group and say, hey, what's everybody using for onboarding? And you're going to get 17 different answers, and you're going to get 17 different answers that probably work 17 different ways really well for 17 different camps who have 17 different issues that they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And so rather than just kind of trying to look through those and pick the cheapest one or the one with the nicest looking interface, really understanding saying, hey, we're running into a specific issue where we need, automated reminders, including to international phone numbers for staff. Does anybody have a platform that can solve this problem? And then you're not going to get answers that don't fit what you're looking for. And so really drilling down on the specificity of your problem, but then getting the chance to say, hey, can I buy you a coffee and chat about this? I just had this long conversation last month with someone who was moving to a new pricing model that I was interested in exploring for one of my clients. And I said, hey, could we chat for half an hour? And we ended up talking for almost an hour. She gave me all this detail, and we applied so many things from this conversation that I would have just never thought about. And she was able to walk me through, well, here's what we did. And then that didn't work. And we changed it to this. And it allowed me to think about some use cases that I might not have come up with, especially if I had just had more of a surface level conversation.
This Go Camp Pro podcast is brought to you by Whereabouts, a new product from our friends at Camptivities. Ever had that heart-stopping moment when a camper accidentally goes home on the bus, but their guardian was supposed to pick them up? Or when you can't confirm everyone's arrived at camp until noon, even though the morning meeting ended hours ago? What about those little moments that slip through the cracks, like staff not knowing it's a camper's birthday or missing a special event reminder? you're not alone. Camps everywhere are saying the same thing. They need a less manual, more connected way to manage the camper experience from drop-off to pickup. Introducing Whereabouts, the only camper management system that updates in real time across 3 interfaces: parents, admin, and staff. The parent app is attendance forward and includes all the features families expect: facial recognition photos, event calendars, news feeds, and more, giving parents peace of mind and your team fewer calls to handle. One system, one set of data, everyone in sync, all the time. From knowing where every camper is, to reducing office chaos, to helping staff feel more connected, Whereabouts help your camp run smarter, not harder. Book a demo today at whereaboutsapp.io.
I love all this. And Victoria, I want you to be my new best friend because I just relate to all these things so hard. And these are real, real things. And I think it's so nice to hear you talk about this because it it goes back to relationships, which is at the core of the camp industry, right? And you're recognizing how overwhelming it can be for camp directors. And we talk about this across all of our podcasts, how a lot of people don't come into this industry to dig into the stuff that you're talking about right now, right? And going to camp conferences, you walk into an exhibit hall and there's 1,000 shiny new things with very skilled salespeople that make connections with you. You get drawn in, they tell you about their stuff. They all sound great. Let's be real, right? Like they all sound wonderful. But if you don't know what you're looking for, you get sucked into a new thing, and then you either have the burden of having to figure out how to use it all by yourself, how to sell it to your people, and how to make sure that it's still used in a way that's efficient for your business. That's a lot for you to do in addition to everything else you have doing as a camp owner and director, right? And so I think that having another person to ask these questions is really helpful. It's not an easy place to be in. I know I did this for Robinhood a little while ago where I was coming in full time newer, right? And so I would probe a little bit more of like, why are we doing it this way? What's going on? That can be a really annoying job for somebody internally at an organization as well. So if you're in an organization that can have someone to do that, great. Otherwise, I think it's great to illuminate for everyone that there are people out there that can help you do those pieces to really help you dive into what those issues might be. And so I guess I'm also curious of,
Jordanna, before you ask your question, I
yeah,
would just like to say for the audience and Victoria, in when it's your daughter who comes in so smart that she says, "Dad, why do you do it that way?" And I'm like, "'Cause it works for me." He goes, "Do you think is it okay if I tweak this?" And I'm like, "Really? You like so it's and so there's this element of just youth and broader thinking and just getting back to that original element of our discussion about we there's this comfort in systems that we've relied upon that over time become a little obsolete, but we stay on them because they're comfortable. But then I would say, as I've tried to do, and I know Jordan's mom is just to try to like abandon those thoughts and just, I think we're at a point now where we really need to embrace these new systems. And if we can have people in our organizations that are willing to take this on, then, there is a real upside to this. And I know Jordanna has a question about just digging into this more, but I just want to say, like, we talk about these things all the time and we're family and it's all that stuff. So just very, very good advice for sure, Jordan.
well, and I think, yeah, what I wanted to dig into a little bit more was, I think I was talking to Andy a few weeks ago, and he has so many wonderful ideas and very innovative. And when people like Andy or other camp operators reach out to you and take that step to hire you and take you on, how does the like explaining it and getting everybody else on board? So though the camp operator might be all prepared for all these changes and say like, okay, we're bringing you on. What difficulties? I know we talked about meeting people where they're at, which is definitely important. But what else do you think people need to consider when they're doing this to kind of make sure that everyone in our care is feeling comfortable with a decision like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, the way I approach it, it goes back to a short stint I had as a market researcher. So, one of my many strange careers that I pulled from is really getting the chance to do in depth interviews with people. And that's the kind of thing that I think again, for your everyday owner or operator, you may not have time to do. But as an outside person coming in, that is an area where I can say, hey, I just want to learn about what you are doing and what kind of challenges you're facing. And really just being able to listen to people and understand not only what they're saying, but also what they mean behind what they say. And understand their relationship with the rest of the people that they work with and what they may be saying and what they may not be saying, because the more that you help people understand that you're trying to solve their problems and help them come up with solutions jointly, the more buy-in they have. It's the same way that we work with kids, right? Is you don't want to just say like, hey, we're going to do this, here's the solution to the problem we're going to solve. Let's come up with a solution together. 9 times out of 10, I'm not necessarily asking for someone to, give me their input on which payroll processor they think is best, but I really do want to know, hey, what kind of communication problems are you having? What, are your technical difficulties at camp during the summer? What kind of issues have people brought to you? You know, what are you worried about might happen? Because then when you come back and say, hey, I found this great solution for you, it's going to solve these four things that you identified as the actual problems that you're facing. I think that's a really strong way to get buy-in from folks. And I always think about the funny kind of tension between the work that we do, because we're able to do really high quality work with lots of camps by making it efficient and kind of using a lot of the same types of systems and becoming experts in them and being able to use them quickly. But at the same time, we know that camps don't have a one size fits all approach. And so no camp wants you to come in and say, hey, I already fixed these problems somewhere else and I'll just, copy and paste the solution for you. It certainly informs some of the ideas that we have but I approach every camp as a new solution and sort of like as a fresh newborn baby who's learning about problems for the first time. And maybe something from my past will inform a solution. But when I first start talking to people, I really want to start from ground zero about what's going on with them. And some of it will sound familiar, but if I start thinking that I know what they're going to say, then I miss what they actually do say.
Hmm. Hmm. If we were to dig into the work smarter, not harder mentality, based on your experience for us pros listening to this, what are some of the areas that you have found that have served helpful to operators to really dig into and sort of analyzing, is this an area that I could look for an updated solution for? I mean, based on your experience working across the industry, what are some of those that you want to put in the mind of camp owners to start thinking about?
Yeah, great question. I think, one of the first things on my mind is what I've kind of mentioned before, which are, tracking expenses and payroll. I just see those as the biggest time suck for people, especially for, owners and operations managers and office managers who, maybe that's not the main part of their role, but it somehow takes up an outsized amount of their time. Another one that I think is can be really tricky to implement well, but that I see huge return on is some sort of project or task management software. I can't count the number of people who've told me, well, we tried Monday.com or we tried Asana or we tried Trello, but it just kind of fell apart. We just kind of stopped using it. It didn't really work. So and so left. And then after that, we didn't really use it anymore. And so I think a lot of times those types of solutions feel a little overwhelming or feel like busy work. Like, oh, I already know what I need to do. I don't need to write down what I need to do and check it off. There can be a lot of resistance to that. But I really subscribe to this idea from David Allen about mind like water. Are you familiar with getting things done? He has
Oh,
this
yeah.
concept. It's this kind of like old school productivity book, like one of the original ones. It's very funny to read now because he talks all about like paper files and calendars, but you can apply it all to, the digital world. But he has this idea right in the beginning of the book called Mind Like Water, where it's a kind of a Zen concept where your mind is like a still pool and it's ready to receive information. And the way that a rock dropped into a pool has ripples, and the ripples are corresponding to the size of the rock. If your mind can take in information and respond to it, it's going to respond, a lot more to a bigger piece of information. If you get a big stimulus, a crazy parent call, now you have to make a change, or something happens at camp, you can respond to it. But then your mind goes back to still and calm. And so the idea that you're not constantly fixating on, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. I need to rely on myself to remember that in March, I need to start sending out the contracts. And I need to rely on myself to remember that in September, we have to call the propane company. All of these things that do become second nature for someone. But again, from a succession planning standpoint, can be really tough to keep that offload. And also really just take up so much of your mental energy that I think as a person who used to spend a lot of time just remembering all of the things I needed to do, it can feel kind of powerful and exciting to say, like, I remember to do all of this stuff and I always know
Yes.
what needs to be done. But imagine how much brain space you're actually using on remembering all of those things and what you could do with that brain energy if you weren't spending all that time remembering. So I have, daily and weekly tasks that are a little bit silly. I literally have like check my email as a task. And because I have a couple of different inboxes I need to check. And it sounds a little silly, but I really just try not to hold any of those things in my head as a remember I have to do. If I know that I have a system that I can see everything in it that needs to happen, then I see all the time surprises, little treats that I left for myself months ago as a reminder to do something where I'm like, wow, I can't believe I set myself a reminder to do that. But it populates up in my task list on a certain date. And I think, wow, it's only January and I wouldn't have thought that I needed to start this. But actually, I should get started on this. I should start thinking about it. I should set a meeting with so and so to get started on it. And then I don't have to expend all this brain power or get to March and think, "Ugh, maybe I should have started this 2 months ago." So anytime I figure out something that I should have done at a different time or I want to remember for a different point in time, I put it in this list. And it has been, I've
Yeah.
spent some time developing the system, but we do the same thing with project templates in Asana where, you onboard someone and you think, okay, I need to get them an email address and set them up in the systems and get them started on payroll. And sure, you could remember to do all those things. You could come up with them each time. But what we've been able to do is iterate on some of these projects so that we can get better and better and better instead of kind of starting from scratch every time. And so now we know, hey, we want to make sure to get someone's dietary preferences right away so that when we have a staff meeting, we know what to order. And we want to make sure to get their t-shirt size before they start so that we can send them a t-shirt with their, welcome package. And we want to make sure to, set a reminder for a year when they become eligible for the 401k. We want to make sure to get them started on that right away and not be scrambling at the last minute right before payroll happens on their annual anniversary. And so being able to iterate on those things and really make more exciting and better and beyond just, checking off a list of tasks
Yeah.
has been a really helpful way that we've used some of those systems too.
Yeah.
I love all that. I think Kelly would be very proud of me right now. I'm taking notes just like she will.
Yeah,
And
I'm seeing you doing
I'm
that.
see going, Kelly. That's for you.
We're gonna
And
put the book in the show notes.
we will definitely do that. And I think you've just given a lot of great examples of like one small step. Like, yes, it can feel so overwhelming, but it's like, what's one smaller thing you could do right now to just level up like just a little bit? So, and those things will add up. It's funny how many times we all look at each other and go, wait, when did we send that email last year? Like, how do we look through that? That happens so often at camp because you forget. I mean, I'm sure it's in every industry, but especially something as cyclical as camp and seasonal, you kind of forget those things. Or you say, I want to remember that for registration next year. And you say that in June when everything is like chaotic and it's hard to remember those
Yeah.
things. So if you can have things set up to put things in places where you'll remember. I know one thing we've done is start to keep a list. And sometimes we're better at keeping track of it than other times. But every time we send an email, we're keeping it now in an Excel document so that we can remember, like, okay, I can look back and say, yeah, we sent a family intro email here, and this is where it's stored because there is no chance my brain is remembering all of that when everything's going on. So I really like those tips. I also think that that whole philosophy of mind like water, it's a trickle down effect. Like when we're escalated and elevated in terms of like, what do we need to do now? What do we need to do? Your whole team is going to feel that. Like they're going to feel your energy, and everyone is looking to you as the camp operator. And so they're going to follow your lead on how you're doing that stuff. Camp operators have a beautiful skill of being able to usually keep that at bay, even though craziness is happening around. But imagine if we can kind of turn the dial down a little bit on the craziness.
I was also thinking, as Victoria was describing the book, is just how it's related to kind of work-life balance a little bit too, right? This idea that our mind, just how our brain is always racing. And for those of us listening who are in the private space, like this is our life. Like we're always thinking camp. There's never a moment where we're not thinking about a family we got to reconnect with, or I forgot to make that call. And I think these systems allow us, as a family business, you want to have systems so we can really apply the time where we can shut it off for a little bit because we trust that we have these systems in place so we won't skip a beat. So we're not in that panic mode when, did you do this? Did you remember to do this? And I think that it's really an extension of the systems within your professional life can really translate into sort of how your personal life is managed or the things you can kind of pursue. So I'm really glad we dove into that. And I'm sure, Victoria, in your work, I'm sure I don't know this, but I'm going to guess that this service and the resourcing that you provide translates into your clients saying, thank you. I now like this has made life easier. I'm sure you have lots of testimonials about that.
Yeah, and I think for us, one of the things that I think sets us apart from consultants is we're often doing a lot of the work. So we're billing families in Camp Minder, we're paying invoices, we're running the payroll.
Right.
We're not just coming in and saying, hey, here's a system, we're doing this, we're executing on it too. But we also know kind of where the line is between what's kind of appropriate for us to be doing and what someone else really should be doing. And so even though our role isn't always necessarily to be prescriptive about that to other people, we can often sit down and help them figure out, hey, what's the best system that's going to work for you? And, this isn't exactly technology related, but it kind of ties into the same thing we were talking about is the idea of having, a system in place for you where you can have, recurrence. Maybe that's something like Asana or Monday or Trello, or maybe it's a notebook that you keep on your desk and is always the thing that works for you.
Right.
And, maybe you have, a note if in your phone where you're always just jotting down things that you want to come back to, or maybe you have a parking lot, bulletin board in your office that anybody can add notes to. There's so many different ways that this kind of thing can be implemented that doesn't have to be necessarily like technology focused. But I think the thing that I really love about what technology does and takes us from something like a notebook or a bulletin board is the idea to recur annual tasks. I mean, every time I get a new passport, I put a note on my calendar for like 10 years in the future to renew the passport. And that saved me multiple times because I'm like, oh, it's 6 months out. I better get going. I wouldn't have looked at my passport to know that. And, I don't have a paper calendar for 6 years in the future. That's only something I can do with Google. So, I think taking advantage of some of those pieces is really interesting.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think it's so nice the flexibility too. And I like what you said earlier just about asking people kind of what their worries are, because those are real things. Like people who are used to writing everything down have serious worries, and whether they're serious to you as the operator, maybe not, but if they're serious to them, then they're serious. And we have to take them seriously and then give them some options on how to troubleshoot. And sometimes that evolves into saying, see, I know you were worried about this. And now let's check in now that you're using this. Are you still worried? And usually what I found is like they do come on board to other things, but you have to address the worry first because you're not going to get that buy in later on.
Yeah. And something else I think also ties into that is something that I think camp people are especially good at, which is the idea of reflecting and iterating as time goes on. And so, even me, I've used this same, method, this framework for 15, 20 years, something like that. And every now and again, I'll wake up at 6 a.m. with my mind spinning. I need to do this. I need to do this. And I'll think to myself, huh, I didn't write these things down in the place I usually write things down. And so my mind is spinning because it doesn't trust my system because it knows I didn't write them down. And that gives me an opportunity to do a brain dump, write everything down, reassess, make sure I'm up to date, and think to myself, oh, okay, why did that happen? Maybe I was traveling and I didn't have access to my computer. And maybe I need a better system for making notes on my phone when I don't have my computer. There's so many different ways that you can look at that. But having a system in place that you're willing to iterate on and willing to improve and willing to reflect on yourself is the most important part too. And I think exactly what you said about people have worries about things a lot, especially when they're writing them down. The other thing is if someone is okay with their current system and they're comfortable with the amount of time they're spending on something and they're comfortable with the fact that someone else could find the information later if they needed to, great.
Yeah.
Good for you. I am in no situation trying to, like, be an evangelist. I'm an evangelist for ramp only. That's my favorite system of all time. But I'm not an evangelist for moving everything to a new system, and I think that's something that I've really had to learn over my career is not to be dismissive of people who prefer a different method, whether it's analog, whether it's a little bit slower. Even if I say, "Hey, you could do this so much faster, you could do this so much easier," it's not for everybody, and so being able to meet people where they're at, I think, is one of those biggest pieces that can be
Yeah,
tricky, but is in the camp owner's, wheelhouse to kind of find the right method for them and their team.
for
Well,
sure.
it's good to hear that it takes other people time to realize that too. I'm getting the eyes for my dad. It's
Me?
true. It's good to know that, like, yes, those skills evolve too, right? You want it done a certain
I love my notepad that I can't read it later, but it's fine. But I'm coming along, Victoria. I'm coming along.
Well, and hey, I live and die by Asana, my task list, but at the same time, every day I write down what I want to do for that
Yeah,
day. I'm pulling from there, I'm pulling from other things, I'm pulling from my brain because the act of writing something out is so important too. And
so
so that's
important.
for
Yeah.
everyone, even if you're,
Yeah.
all in on technology.
Right.
We can't, lose our humanity.
but
Well, for sure.
and I was just gonna say also, like, efficiency, and this has taken me a long time to learn, like, efficiency doesn't mean that everything has to be rehauled, right? Like, it doesn't mean that you have to redo everything. You can rework things, you can have conversations, you could be okay with the old way to do things. It's just what small things can you implement and what questions can you ask and what deep dives can you do, it sounds like, through our conversation. Those are the things I think we could focus on a little bit more.
Totally. Well, this has been wonderful, Victoria. So many things to think about, and I appreciate the insight. But before we wrap things up, I am going to take Kelly's place in issuing our rapid fire questions, Victoria. This is a new feature for this season of the Camp Owners Podcast. So I'm going to hit you with these. And I want the first thing that comes to your mind. So here we go. What's your favorite camp meal?
Pizza and corn.
Nice. If you could lead any program area, what would it be at camp?
Definitely leave no trace and survival.
Oh, okay. Love that. You like being in the woods and doing those
Mhm.
things. Yeah, I love that. S'mores, do you like them burnt or golden brown?
Golden brown. If it burns, I throw it in the fire.
Okay.
Girl after my own heart.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you give me the stink eye when as a camper, were you like, you missed home as a camper and it was hard to enjoy, or were you like, peace out, mom and dad, I'll see you when I see you? Where were you on that spectrum?
I was peace out for sure. Our camp was 10-day sessions and there were several per summer. And I specifically remember one summer coming home from a session and calling the Girl Scout Council and booking myself onto another session and telling my mom, I'm going back to camp in 3 days. And she was like, all right,
Love that. Amazing. I mean, when you were in the camp space, on the phone or in the action kind of person?
in the action for sure.
Totally in the action. Great. And if you had to pick your favorite camp song,
I love camp songs. A hard one. I'm going to say campfire song on the loose,
okay.
silly camp song, the billboard song.
Okay. Wow.
Very nice.
I love all of that. Skinnamarink dinky dink. I like, the actions. I mean,
Classic.
day camp, the 5-year-old dig that. It's a great song. The adults like it too.
Yeah.
This has been really great. And Victoria, thanks for your time. If people wanted to reach out to you, learn more about what you do, connect with you as a resource, what's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Yeah. Our website is the easiest. So it's PolarisSolutionsGroup.com. And people can book a call with me right on the site. You can also email me directly. My email is victoria@PolarisSolutionsGroup.com. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the places.
You're in all the places. Amazing. Great. And I encourage everyone to connect with Victoria to learn more for sure. And Jordanna, thank you for being on the show today, coming out of the bullpen, helping dad out. I really appreciate that. And
Anytime.
if people wanted to connect with you, how can they reach you?
You can reach me by email is probably the best. My email is Jordanna with 2 N's, Jordanna at camprobinhood.ca. And I'm looking forward to seeing so many friends at upcoming camp conferences. So please come say hi.
Yes, we are approaching that season. Can't wait to reconnect with friends. Folks, if you want to get a hold of me, it's Howie at camprobinhood.ca because we are in Canada and winter is still here. And you can reach me on LinkedIn or Instagram and love connecting with all the camp pros out there. So please reach out. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this episode and lots of good stuff there from our show and other Go Camp Pro podcasts like Jordanna's Day Camp Pod. Check that out if you haven't. We hope you enjoyed this. Victoria, thank you. Jordanna, thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we can't wait to see you again and share another Camp Owners podcast. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Camp Owners Podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review on Apple Music or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, you can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. The Camp Owners Podcast is part of the Go Camp Pro Podcast Network. Find a podcast for camp pros of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Hey, Camp Pros. We love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, if you've gotten even one good idea from a Go Camp Pro podcast, a masterclass, from the Summer Camp Pros group on Facebook, at a conference, or wherever else, we ask that you give credit where credit is due. That way, we can encourage camp pros to keep freely sharing their brilliant ideas and make the camp industry better. Thanks very much.